Very briefly, I'm Kristen Hychka. I work at the New York State Water Resources Institute at Cornell. And my background is in biology, wildlife and fisheries science, and geography. And woo, geographers. And I realized that I've been working with GIS for like 22 years now, primarily on aquatic systems, looking at landscape assessment, ecology related to aquatic systems. A lot of it was small headwater streams. Yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. That's my background, and I've worked in academic settings and government settings and some consulting too. And I can't tell you how many prioritization projects I've worked on where we've developed a tool that helps people prioritize where they're going to do work, So I've invested in that approach, using GIS to build these tools. But at the same time, I understand the reality is not always, spitting out an answer from a machine. And of course, the community, that's what's going to happen. So maybe that's the geographer. Geography is bigger, you come to understand that the world is a little more complicated than that. So anyway, so what I'm here to talk about tonight is sort of the watershed planning side of this. So how on a municipal or watershed level can you use tools to, oops, oh, okay. To identify and prioritize stream buffers in need of protection and improvement. So, you can use these tools for both ends of the spectrums. So very quickly, I'm just going to throw a plug out here. This is a Vermont program called Making Room for Rivers, and actually the name is taken from a Dutch program. And basically, the reason I bring it up is that, we're talking about buffers, and Lydia kind of alluded to this, but really, we're talking about stream corridors. And a stream corridor is not just, it's the in-stream, it's the bank, it's the adjacent upland area, but it's also adjacent wetlands, floodplains. It's these complex, dynamic systems, and they want to move, they want to change, they want to flood. That's obviously in climate change that's increasing, but that's what these systems are all about. And so the reality is we're thinking about and dealing with, and that obviously from a regulatory standpoint is a little more complicated, but the reality is that's what these systems are. And I will throw in a plug, I don't know that it's come up much yet tonight, but this whole program that I'm a huge fan of in Vermont is really driven by a lot of things, but one of the main drivers of it is flooding. And so thinking about protecting riparian areas, so not just thinking of them as buffers, but as like functional spaces really, riparian areas for the purpose of reducing, for both flood attenuation, holding water in these sort of, in these places where there's divots, and if you guys have walked in a functioning floodplain, you see that there's little pools, there's little backwaters, there's places that hold the water, but it's also slowing down the water where there's wood, there's vegetation. So these systems function in a lot of ways also to reduce flooding. So I just want to make sure that came up. So very quickly, there are a lot of different ways you can do assessment, this kind of assessment. It can be at a broad scale. So what I'm mostly talking about are watershed scale assessments, sort of a more rapid, maybe a reach scale assessment, and then a more intensive or really kind of site level assessment. And these are not discrete. There are pieces, a lot of different assessments kind of look at different spatial scales, and you can collect information on a lot of different scales, but roughly that's how these assessments work. I'm mostly going to be talking about this broad scale, this broad sort of watershed level GIS-y, but not entirely. And again, I guess I already talked about this, but the reality is, so I'm talking over here about this planning side of things, sort of targeting, thinking about what endpoints that we're interested in maximizing. So if you're really interested in nutrients, how are you thinking about where are you siting these projects because you want to hold nutrients or filter nutrients, and prioritizing based on those, what you come up with. And so in my mind, a municipality or watershed group, they're kind of looking at thinking about places in terms of, are these really good sites for protection? Are these high candidates for protection? High or low, let's say. You could put them in different categories. Are these really high or low level priority for restoration? And so these are some tools that can help you get at that. But the reality is the work that gets done often has to do with opportunity as well. And so, there might be, it's a willing landowner. Somebody, like the case that Scott brought up in Caroline. It was a wonderful place. It turned out to be a really smart place to do an easement, but it was an opportunity. Or maybe an event, so, a big storm, a big flood, often, there's some erosion that happens, so it's, this opportunity, and you kind of jump on it. So, maybe take this all with a grain of salt, or also, maybe the real planners in the room wouldn't like me just saying that. But really, that you need to be thinking about planning and be ready for these opportunities and events. That it's not one or the other. That you really, and Tompkins County is a wonderful place for that. I mean, there's a lot of good planning going on, but also a lot of this work happens because of opportunity. How am I doing for time? 5 minutes. Whoa, okay. So I'm going to go really quickly, fire hose here, through some tools and approaches that may be familiar to some of you. So just a raise of hands. How many people here use GIS? Geographic Information Systems, that's what it is. Okay. So, maybe 20, 15%. How many of you work with somebody who does? That, has somebody in your, okay, so yeah. All right, so I'm going to be talking about a number of different approaches that are hopefully, some of them you need GIS skills, others you really don't. And that's a beautiful thing about GIS right now, is that a lot, the online, the web-based approaches are now much more powerful and accessible. And so you really don't necessarily need a lot of GIS skills to kind of reap some of the benefits of GIS. So I'm going to go through some of these. We'll see how fast I do. First, I'm going to talk really quickly about this. Well, I'll just jump. The Stream Corridor Assessment Guide from the Upper Susquehanna Coalition, which some other people in the room probably could even give a whole 4 hours on just that topic. But the Trees for Tribs Statewide Riparian Assessment, Susquehanna Basin Climate Change Resilience GIS Toolkit, and then the Tompkins County Natural Resource Mapper, and then, actually I'm going to flip the order there, but Model My Watershed from Stroud Water Institute. TRIBS. So TRIBS, Trees for Tribs is a DEC program. TRIBS is just short for tributary. So it's primarily, yeah. Trees for Tribs. Good question. Yeah, please jump in, because again, I'm trying to go fast here, so I will probably use acronyms, but I'll do my best. So all this said, there are a lot of approaches. I also wanted to talk about some approaches that were being used in different states. There's a lot of great work going on in Utah, and some kind of emerging. There's a lot of good research happening, even just here in New York State. But I think that's another time. I won't talk about that tonight. I think there's enough good, useful, practical resources that can be used tonight, tomorrow morning, by any of you in the room. So I'm going to talk about those resources. So again, I'm talking briefly about the Stream Corridor Assessment Guide. So basically, this is a visual assessment of stream corridor functional health, flooding resiliency. What's really nice about this system, like I said, it takes kind of a broader approach. I'm going to jump forward. It looks at the stream channels, stream banks, stream floodplain, riparian areas, and upland impacts. So it's a very integrated approach to doing a watershed planning or assessment effort. A lot of this work is, like it said, visual assessment. It's going to the sites and following, so I'll jump back. What they've done primarily and maybe in the end, somebody who knows more about this can cut me off, but a lot of these tools, what they're using here are pulled from federal guidance, national, pieces that have been around for a while, but what they've done is they've tailored this for our area. So it's a really practical tool so if you look just here, for example, you can go to a site and you look at riparian width. That's one of the indicators. And then they tell you how to look at and assess and how you give it a score. You can break it down to just a simple 1 through 4. They give great guidance. They point to a lot of existing guidebooks, and so there's trainings in how to do this. This has been done in Pony Hollow. I think that's right, Pony Hollow Creek. That's not the only place. It's been done in a lot of creeks around in the Upper Susquehanna, but it's a very, very powerful tool that's on the intense. It's not up there at the watershed scale. Some of the pieces are GIS, but they're really kind of site level, fairly intense assessments that get you a lot of really good information. So here's the piece, just looking at the second from the bottom. For riparian areas, they have you look at the width of zones, the land use by zone, vegetative health, slope, and habitat quality and type. So that's the kind of information you'd collect, and people do collect. Volunteers, it's not just trained professional volunteers do this too. The statewide riparian opportunities assessment is put together by this Trees for Tribs program, the DEC program. What they came up with is they came up with a suite of indicators so the H or S here means healthy or stress. So ways to identify either healthy or stressed systems. And the indicators are based on species presence, water quality, connectivity, hydrology, or land cover. And again, they break it down. So just looking at land cover, they get it canopy cover, natural cover, impervious surface, landscape condition assessment. So they have a suite of indicators that build these maps. So this may be a little bit daunting, but this is just a website. So if any of you all wanted to tonight go home and start playing with this, you could. So basically I went in, and this is when you first get in there, I put in Oswego region, and it puts you in and you can start exploring what is the condition of these watersheds. And some of the, so let's see, where's the pointer here? Okay, so all of these, they're not really watersheds, these units, let's say, are representative by these dots here, and they have ecological health or stress. So those indicators that I just talked about, it's like high or low for the health or stress. But what's really nice about this is you can then play with, if you wanted to pull this down and actually, say you wanted to look at canopy cover riparian, you could actually make that this index and look at and then this other, maybe you could say impervious surface in the riparian area. And you could see how all these points, how all these hydrologic units fall out for those indicators that you're interested in. So it's really very user-friendly. It's a little dense, but there are longer, there are better, longer presentations about this that you could look at, but you can get some good information fairly quickly without GIS experience. Just having the kind of knowledge and experience that the people in this room have, I think you could pull a lot out of it. So one thing you can then do is, in this case, I focused in on this one area. You then click on the catchments tab. And then it breaks it down even further into smaller catchments, and it gives scores. This is a comprehensive score again, but you can look at all of those indices, those suite of indices that a lot of them have to do with riparian areas. So you can look at how those things play out. Here you could just pop up ArcGIS Online. You just click that. This opens up. It's another website. Again, you don't need any proprietary software. You don't need special training. And so this is showing, this is my dear town of Caroline, showing the runoff risk. Dark is high, light is low. You could do the same here for natural cover in the riparian area. So it's a way to start. Again, this is not, well, yeah, so you get the idea. And then this, which I think is really handy, this is, and I'm not sure where it says it here. Oh, okay. All you have to do is hit print, And you can get a pretty decent map that you could bring with you to a planning board meeting. I mean, you could always pull this up on a screen, but like anybody, no GIS experience, hit print, and it will get you this nice map. So you too are a cartographer, cartographer in the wilds of central New York. But so that's a really powerful thing about this tool. Another thing, if you do have some GIS background, you can download. A nice thing about this tool is it's not just using a 100-foot buffer. So what it's doing is, 100-foot buffers are great, but what they're using is a hydrologically active zone. And so they actually modeled, they'll tell you that it's not FEMA regulated, but the 50-year floodplain, that's what this is based on. So they have a 50-year floodplain for the state of New York. You can download it, this 50-year floodplain, modeled floodplain. So you can then use it to do other analysis. In this case, all I did was I threw it on top of a land cover, but you can start looking at, where are there areas in your municipality and the watershed that you're interested in that have, ag, hay and pasture in this hydrologically active zone. So that's a very powerful tool, and I'd recommend, again, it's a little daunting at the beginning. I'm at 15 minutes, okay. All right, I'm going to breeze through these last few. I can't quite stop, but okay. So this other one is the Susquehanna Basin Climate Change Resilience GIS Toolkit. Basically, you can get down to looking at this only is in the upper Susquehanna. I mean, in the Susquehanna. So if you, or at least the data that I looked at was only for the Susquehanna. Maybe there's more data out there that wasn't available off the website. But you can, gets at buffer restoration opportunities. So really simple, you could print this out. Again, this is another one where this was in GIS. So I will say this wasn't a mapper, this wasn't an online mapper, this was an ARC desktop. Again, you can find these opportunities, these BMPs. So using their criteria, they identified critical buffer areas, wetland buffer restoration. So another useful tool. And then finally, they came up with this sort of amalgamated priorities ranking, buffer priorities rank, which again, in some ways, that's a great thing. Here it is. It's ranked for you. Again, maybe your municipality has different weightings, and you may want to just kind of tease this apart a little bit more than just taking it at face value. Okay, super fast. This is Model My Watershed, Stroud Water Resources Center. This is very powerful. Totally don't need GIS, totally online. You can actually run models. So you can run models that get at what is the sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus loading for this area, for whatever area. It's different. I chose this watershed. It could be a township. They have different areas you can look at. You can also run scenarios. So you can put in stream back fencing. Take this all with a grain of salt. Totally take this with a grain of salt. I'm sure the practitioners in the back room are like wanting to take this, but you can run different scenarios by putting on. So say this tells you how much of your stream is in ag, the stream length in your watershed is in ag, how much are you going to modify, and then you can rerun those models. Again, anybody in this room could do that tomorrow if they wanted to, and the link is on the resources page. Last thing I'm going to talk about, and one of the most important, is the Tompkins County Natural Resources Mapper. It's an incredible tool that only, I'd say, a few places in New York State have this level of GIS data that's available to anyone on a mapper. You don't need GIS training. This is, so they have all kinds of data. They have the 3 levels, state, federal, and the local wetlands. They have aquifers, floodplains. So this is just a map. Again, cartographer, anybody, pick up a browser and you're a cartographer. You could create this map to take with you to a meeting. And what it's showing is, this is the stream buffer. So they have a 50-foot stream buffer around the intermittent streams. What are the land uses in those areas? And then you can even have the parcels, which you could then click on if it was still in the website. So this is just, there's all these fancy tools, and some of those may be helpful and useful, but this, when I talk with practitioners who we work with in the Hudson, they said that this is one of the things that's most useful. Just get out a map, get out some aerials, start looking with the people on your watershed board or your planning board, and kind of go back old school and just look at what's happening in your riparian areas. So that's it. And yeah, maybe I won't take questions. Yeah, I won't take, yeah, talk with me after if you have questions.